UT. Chargers don't play in San Diego anymore. I'm going to be visiting there with some family, with some friends, and headed to Carson, California for a Saturday night sundown showdown with the San Diego Superchargers. Luke is out in Owings Mills. I was out in Owings Mills, and the Eric Weddles of the world telling their Phillip Rivers stories, and certainly, not just an important game here, but really do or die kind of sort of given the rest of the scheduling and where other teams are and where this wild card race is. This would be an ugly flight home after a loss and certainly would bring a lot less interest in the Cleveland game next week, I would think, Luke.
No question about it. I mean, this is not a must-win, meaning that they're totally done if they don't win on Saturday night, but it is very close to it. And you look at the different scenarios, it really comes down to, in most cases, the Ravens needing to win their final two to get in. I mean, are there some other possibilities? Sure, but you don't want to be in a position where you're waiting for two or three other things to go your way, or in a position, for example, in the division where you're kind of sort of hoping that Pittsburgh stubs its toe against the Cincinnati team that is completely decimated by injuries and playing out the string week 17. So you need to win, and you have to try to block out all the noise. You just mentioned, Eric Weddle, even though he's not going back to San Diego, certainly it's an emotional position for him to be in with some of the guys that he's going to be playing against for the first time. But there's no room for being sentimental. This is that time of year where the Ravens have fallen short the last couple of years. It's the same exact position. 8-6 going into week 16 and needing, even being in a position where you essentially control your playoff fate. And that's what they do. They're all but completely guaranteed to make it if they win their last two. If not, their chances plummet. And then they're at the mercy of what happens with Pittsburgh and what happens with Tennessee and Indianapolis and even Miami until they lose another game. So it really just comes down to it. You got to go on the road, and you have to beat a good football team. It's not ideal going on the road.
Same thing you'd have to do in January, by the way. Literally, same thing they're going to be asked to do 2 weeks from now, right?
Right. I mean, you can talk about flying across the country and the fact that you're playing in a weird environment, a soccer stadium, and that should be to the Ravens' benefit because the Chargers don't really have
fans.
A home crowd anymore. I mean, they just don't. But the Chargers are coming off of extra rest. Ravens are playing on a short week. So some of it's stacked against them, but at the same time, this team also has a lot of stuff going for it right now. They're healthy. They have an offense that is different from what anyone else in the National Football League is doing. And yes, the Chargers have 5 games worth of tape to try to figure this thing out, but, well, the Buccaneers had 4 games worth of tape, and they couldn't figure it out. And Kansas City had they had 3 games to try to figure it out, and they had some marginal success, but it was more so their offense made more plays at the end. So it's definitely the Ravens have some mojo working in their favor, even when you look at some of the other circumstances. But this is also the best defense they're going to have played since the bye week. Lamar Jackson was asked about it on Wednesday, and while he was hesitant to just flat out say this is the best defense he's faced, because coaches and players are kind of trained not to say things like that because you're going to offend someone else or you're going to slight someone in the process. But he did acknowledge this is the fastest defense he has seen on tape, and I think that's what's going to be fascinating. We've seen this Ravens defense go up against plenty of good offenses the last couple of years, and they've played well at times. They haven't played well at times. For me, it's going to come down to this. Can Lamar Jackson and the rest of the Ravens offense, because it's not just him, they need everyone making plays, are they going to be able to score enough points? They scored 24 against Kansas City. They played the Chiefs really tough, but if you had told me going into the game if they scored 24 points, if I thought they'd get it done, I'd say no. And, well, they didn't get it done. So you're going to have to score points. You're going to have to be productive. You're going to have to sustain drives. You're going to have to finish those sustained drives with touchdowns and not just field goals. And Lamar Jackson pointed that out on Wednesday, just talking about what they need to do. And you do all those things, I think the Ravens have a really good chance to pull off what would be an upset because this is a better overall football team they're playing on Saturday, but the Ravens can be better for 3 hours on Saturday. They improve their playoff chances by a large margin.
It is fascinating. Like, we're done talking about Joe Flacco, right? Like, that's done, right? There is very little thought that if they're down 28-17 in the fourth quarter, I don't even know if they're going to tap him on the shoulder at this point. I mean, he is in witness protection right now, from what I can tell, other than when the cameras decide to focus on him on a Saturday night, right?
I mean, I think so. I mean, if Lamar Jackson gets hurt, yeah, it's Joe Flacco again. But, I mean, you say that about any player at any position, right? I mean, don't get me wrong. If Lamar Jackson goes down and Flacco goes in there and leads the Ravens to a win, and it's a hell of a story, and then it's a heck of a conversation for Week 17 and potentially in the playoffs then. But the fact that we didn't see any hint, any evidence of Joe Flacco playing or even a consideration of him playing against Tampa Bay, I think that that would lead you to believe that's kind of where the Ravens are right now. That Flacco's the very clearly defined backup, and Lamar Jackson's the starter. I will say this, in looking at the Chargers' defense, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago about would there be a package of plays for Joe Flacco. I'm not expecting it. But I will say this, when you look at the Chargers' defense and how they profile, it's a better defense than they've played since before the bye week. They are better against the pass than against the run, although they're much better against the run than this recent run of defenses that the Ravens have seen and had so much success on the ground. But looking at the Chargers and looking at some of the different analytics sites and metrics and everything, they have been really good against the short passing game and against passes over the middle of the field. And if you look at how Lamar Jackson is profiled as a passer, it's been short passes over the middle of the field. So as much as we will spend time focusing on the running game and what do the Chargers do there, we saw this in Kansas City. The Ravens, it was kind of lost in the wash because it was such an exciting game. The Ravens didn't run the ball all that exceptionally well against the Chiefs, really after the first quarter. They gashed them in the first quarter. And then after that, they were just kind of okay. In fact, in the second half, they averaged 3.8 yards per carry, which isn't terrible, but if you're all about the running game and having to be so dependent, you have to be way better than that. So, long story short, one reason why they were able to hang with the Chiefs was Lamar Jackson was able to make just enough plays in the passing game, and I think the same thing's going to hold true on Saturday. This is not going to be a game where you're just going to run it 55 times and say, well, that's going to be good enough. I think you're hoping ideally you can run it 35, 40 times, but those 25 times you pass the ball, you need production, and you need consistent production. And the Chargers, for as much as Derwin James has been an absolutely fantastic rookie at the safety position, their defense in general has been very vulnerable against the deep ball this year. So does that mean we'll see Lamar Jackson take some deep shots? I think it should. Is there, to go back to your original question, is there a spot where the Ravens would try to get really weird and put Joe Flacco in the game and try to take a deep shot? I'm guessing not, but this defense has profile as being a team that could be vulnerable to that type of play. But they're going to have to make plays in the passing game, and we've talked about this, and it will hold true in January as well. The Ravens, it's great being run-heavy. It's worked for them. It's worked for them against, let's face it, bad defenses. They're playing a pretty good defense this week. I think they're still going to find plenty of success running the ball, but they have to make some more plays in the air. And, I think that's going to be the big challenge because based on what we've seen from Lamar Jackson, those middle of the field, 7 to 13 yards down the field, that's kind of where his success area has been, where I believe 10 of his 14 completions this past week were in that portion of the field. Well, the Chargers have been really good in that area of the field, so it's not going to be easy. But I think he's the guy. I to go back to what you said originally, I at this point would be surprised if Joe Flacco is a factor in this game, unless Lamar Jackson gets hurt, or unless he is just so bad to a level that we haven't come close to seeing. Even if you look at the second quarter of the Atlanta game, even worse than that, he'd have to be for me to think that they're going to go back to Joe Flacco at this point. I just kind of feel like that ship has sailed, as much as I don't like saying that, because I think, Joe Flacco can still play in this league, and I think some of these circumstances, I feel for him to a degree, but this team has won with what they've done the last 5 weeks, and they're going to continue to try to win as long as they're playing football here in 2018, and they hope early into 2019.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter, and Luke at WNST.net. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at the Lee Tessier team. Selling my condo could be selling your home in 2019. If you're in the market to buy or sell, you got a great realtor there out in the community, a friend of ours. LeeTessier.com is the way to find him. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. Make sure you're loading up on that Cloverland eggnog as we get up on the holidays, the fried chicken, the Western fries, and make sure you're using the ROFO rewards card or the app when you're pumping your gas. You'll get your Western fries, your chicken free, as well as some coffee and the Kona blend as well. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast for the holidays. Also, make sure you're getting over to see my friends at King Discount Liquors and giving the King a ring. Lottery, beer, booze, the best prices anywhere. Eggnog, gingerbread, beer, and wine and spirits and all the good stuff to ring in 2019 right. Make sure you get over and give the King a ring and say hello to Johnny Bev as well. Luke, Pro Bowl, I know we're going to be getting together in 6 weeks when it's actually going on, and the team in the Dayglow Green will be playing the team in the Dayglow Magenta, and it'll be Team Irwin and Team Dion and Neon this and Prime that and all of that. But these players really do get their feelings hurt. Like, I watched Justin Tucker sit in the corner and talk about how it didn't mean anything to him and it meant everything. And I watched even Marlon Humphrey, and I don't know why he thought he was going to sort of get some sort of seniority. I don't know why he thought he was going to. But nonetheless, it's a respect old man's thing. That's what the Pro Bowl is. It's a game nobody cares about or nobody watches. But, boy, when you think you earned it and you don't get called, you get upset. And when anybody would ask about Eric Weddle, how could he be in the Pro Bowl? Everyone bristles. How could you dare say Eric Weddle couldn't be in the Pro Bowl? Yeah. Well, they can't all make the Pro Bowl. Not the guys that are in their prime, before their prime, coming into it, getting out of it, and going to the Hall of Very Good. You can't have all of them make the Pro Bowl. And in the end, dude, I can't believe we actually dedicate voice to this, but it is what it is, and people care about it, I think.
Well, I think it's more a case of, and this goes back to what you just said about the players, I think people care more about the idea of it, the principle of the Pro Bowl, more so than the game. I mean, I couldn't have less interest in the actual game that's played in late January, and I think it's in Orlando again this year. I have zero interest. You and I will spend Monday of Super Bowl week in Atlanta making fun of it for 20 minutes, if we even get a chance to watch a few minutes of it, which last year I didn't even know it was on in the middle of the afternoon. Like, I literally had no idea it was being played during the day on Sunday afternoon the week before the Super Bowl. I knew it was the week before the Super Bowl, but it had always been primetime. But as far as it goes, we've seen so many examples of players, and I'll address Eric Weddle first. Look, I don't think Eric Weddle deserved to be in the Pro Bowl. I'm not sure he even really should have garnered that much consideration for it. And that's acknowledging that Eric Weddle very much still has value to this football team, even if it's more so from a cerebral standpoint, from an experience standpoint, from a wisdom standpoint, in the same way that Ed Reed and Ray Lewis very much fit that category in their final season here in Baltimore. I mean, it happens to Hall of Famers like Reed and Lewis. It happens to guys that are Hall of Good, Hall of Very Good kind of players, like Eric Weddle will fit somewhere into that category. But we've seen it's about reputation. It's about how well-liked players are around the league. How many times have we seen young players on this Ravens defense? Haloti Ngata was a great example of this. It took Ngata a few years to finally get into the Pro Bowl, and then he made it. And he ended up making it a couple years past when he probably deserved it. And that's just the way this kind of works. So I think that you see a little bit of that with an Eric Weddle. I think you've seen that with, I don't think Ed Reed was truly a Pro Bowl player in 2012, if we're calling a spade a spade. So that happened. It's part of the deal. I'm not saying it's right. It's not necessarily consistent, because then you do have someone like Justin Tucker, who is very well established around the league and viewed almost universally, if not completely, as the best kicker in the National Football League. He's the most accurate kicker in NFL history. I'm not ready to call him the greatest kicker in the history of the league because he needs to do it for a longer period of time. But that said, he's been very firmly established as the best kicker in the league, or in the top 2 or 3 if you want to try to be contrarian in the argument. And yet he hasn't made the Pro Bowl the last 2 years. And you see who does make it. Now, Myers, the kicker for the Jets, who has had a nice season, but he kicks for a lousy team. He hasn't really had these signature moments. I mean, last year, remember, it was Boswell making it over Tucker. And Boswell, even though I think Tucker had a better year, Boswell, I think, had a chance to make 4 different last-minute game-winning kicks for the Steelers. And I want to say 2 or 3 of those were on national TV. So he got that exposure. But in this case, about the best I can think about this, a couple things come to mind. One, when you are viewed as the absolute best, you're held to a higher standard than even the second, third, fourth, and fifth best at your position or in your role or in your job. It's the same reason why Bill Belichick has only won 3 Coach of the Year awards in his career. When you really think about it, put aside the whole cheating thing for just a moment and just think about the success that they've had. Bill Belichick should probably be Coach of the Year almost every single year, but he's not. Why? Because the expectation is the Patriots are going to win 12 or 13 games every single year and get at least to the AFC Championship, if not the Super Bowl. So that kind of gets, it becomes kind of just static. It just becomes the norm, and then he's not recognized. The same reason Mike Trout has only won 2 MVPs and probably should have 3 or 4 or 5 at this point. I mean, he's been that great. He's been recognized as the best player in baseball for at least the last 5, 6, 7 years. So I think there's a little bit of that at work with Justin Tucker. It's not right. It's not fair. I think it stinks. I think he was snubbed. But it's why we shouldn't lose sleep over the Pro Bowl, long story short. I think, Nestor, I even touched on this in the little bit I wrote about this and opined about the Pro Bowl. I actually think it would have been a better story for this Ravens defense that we've talked about all year. We've said that the sum has been greater than the parts, that they've been greater than the sum of the parts. And I thought it would have been better if they actually had not had anyone voted to the Pro Bowl from the defensive side of the ball. And frankly, I'm not sure I would have voted anyone. The one guy I actually would have maybe considered, and I think he probably would have been more into the Pro Bowl alternate category, is Marlon Humphrey. I think he's been their best defensive player this year. I think he's played at the highest level consistently. I think everyone else has just kind of been solid to good. And that's not a bad thing. It speaks to their depth. It speaks to the coaching acumen of Wink Martindale. And it speaks to the fact that they have played very well as a cohesive unit. But I feel like that would have been the better story here, that this top-ranked scoring defense, this top-ranked defense in terms of yards allowed, wouldn't have had anyone in the Pro Bowl. And I frankly think you could have made the argument that that's really how it should have turned out. But I'm not going to argue too much about C.J. Mosley. I don't think he's had a great year. I don't think this has been close to being his best year. I think the knee injury early on hurt him. I don't think Eric Weddle deserved it at all. And, I say that as someone who still thinks that Weddle does bring something to the table, even if he doesn't have the same range. He has 0 interceptions and 3 pass breakups this year. I mean, your free safety, that's not very good. Stats aren't everything, but they're something. They have to matter for something. So that one was a head-scratcher, and then Tucker being left out, I didn't agree with that. The one that I was really happy about, though, Marshall Yanda, coming back from the broken ankle. He had the streak of 6 straight Pro Bowl snaps. Is he the best? Is he still the best guard in the NFL? Probably not. I think he has probably lost. I don't know how you even equate it for an offensive lineman. They don't do much running, so I don't know if I'd say he lost a half a step, but for lack of a better term, yeah, he's probably lost a little bit, but he's still one of the best, and I still think he was deserving of being in the Pro Bowl. So I was glad to see that for him. And, Marshall Yanda now, tied for 4th on the all-time Ravens list of career Pro Bowls, tied with Terrell Suggs and behind only Ray Lewis, Jonathan Ogden, and Ed Reed. So pretty cool territory for Marshall Yanda as he is nearing the end of his career but still playing at a high level.
Luke will be in Owings Mills all week long. We're getting ready for the game on Saturday night, and everything gets shifted back a little bit, right, when Coach Harbaugh gets a hold of this, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit of a different week. It's a short week. They're going to fly out on Thursday for the game, so they're still doing their extra day to kind of get adjusted to West Coast time. It's accelerated, so they had a walkthrough practice on Tuesday, so that made you feel a little bit almost like what they do for their Thursday night game weeks. And it's accelerated. The good news for them is they're relatively healthy. Nick Boyle has been back on the practice field just a few days after suffering the concussion. So that doesn't mean he's fully cleared just yet, but it means he clearly has a shot to be ready to go on Saturday night. Matt Judon missed a little bit of time early in the week, but he's back out there. So they're relatively healthy. So much as we talk about the short week and the cross-country flight, playing either the second best team in the AFC or maybe the best team in the AFC before it's all said and done. The deck's stacked against them in those ways, but like I said, the Ravens unconventional and relatively healthy, and they've got a shot here. So I'm not predicting a win necessarily, but I think it's certainly feasible for them to go on the road and get a win. And if they're in the same position they were in against the Chiefs, got to finish the job this time around. And, hey, talked about that last year against Cincinnati when they were kind of sort of in this spot, although that was Week 17. And they talked about this 2 years ago when they went to Pittsburgh on Christmas and they had a chance to win and couldn't get the job done. They got to finish. And if they do, they'll give themselves a great chance to be playing in a couple weeks. And if not, they'll be at home, and we'll be talking about all the changes to this football team that are going to come to some degree either way. It's just going to be a matter of how dramatic it is, and these last couple of weeks, I think, are going to have a big hand in determining how that shakes out.
All right, you can find me, Nasty, at WNST.net. You can find Luke at WNST.net. Together, we are out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. The morning newspaper ships digitally to your email inbox each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by our friends at Planet Fitness at PlanetFitness.com, as well as the Maryland Jockey Club and Laurel Park, where they are racing through the holiday and into 2019. Make sure you check out what they're doing on the front of WNST.net as well as in our morning newspaper. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.